Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Elwood. I'm the dean here at the Harvard Kennedy School. And welcome to a rare noontime forum event and an even rarer summertime forum event. We don't do forums in the summer because we can't get anyone to come into the audience. And so that's, nonetheless, we've made a special exception here for obvious reasons. And today's forum event is called Laying the Foundation for the Next Generation of Clean Energy Jobs. And it's our very great honor to be hosting both Congressman Markey and Secretary Chu today, because they are central players, centrally engaged in the most fundamental one of the most fundamental challenges facing the country. I'm going to say a few words of introduction in a moment, but let me just say one word about the ground rules of the forum, which is what we do is we bring in extraordinary and distinguished speakers. Ours today are no exception. And the ground rule is really simple. They get a chance to speak, and in exchange, they must take free and unfettered questions from the audience. And those people that try and violate those rules, if you try and disrupt anything or anything else, I will ask you to please wait until the question and answer period. And if that doesn't work, we will ask you and we will politely escort you from the premises. So sorry to have to start there, but we do have some polar bears outside protesting. Mr. Secretary, welcome back to Harvard. The Secretary was an honorary degree and our speaker at the commencement this year. I'm also delighted that your Chief of Staff, Rod O'Connor, is a 2003 graduate of the Kennedy School, so we're very glad to have you here as well. And we have many, many distinguished guests here today, and I am not going to risk recognizing some but not others, with one exception. Given that we're in the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum and so forth, it seems to me Joe Kennedy, who is here, we should give a hand, and thank you for being here and for all your work on Congress. Now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Ed Markey, Congressman Ed Markey, who is a very long-time advocate of energy and environmental issues on the Hill. We have a project here at the Kennedy School that we call Acting in Time. And it's focused on those issues that in some ways any sensible person perhaps, or a thoughtful person, can see coming a mile away. But for some reason, we're unwilling or unable to act, even though failure to act will at a minimum make things much worse and could conceivably make it impossible to act in the future. If ever there was a topic an issue that is of this sort, the set of issues around climate change, energy, and the environment are very much there. What is unusual about Congressman Markey is he was one of those people who saw climate change coming long before it was popular or widely discussed and whatever. He's been trying very hard to act in time, and now I think we are on the verge of doing something which could be quite important. Congressman Markey has been a member of the House of Representatives since 1976, and he represents the 7th District, which includes his hometown of Malden. He chairs the Select Committee on Energy Independence and Global Warming, as well as the Energy and Environment Subcommittee for the Energy and Commerce Committee. What's interesting about this subcommittee is it encompasses sort of both energy and environment, where the Senate needs 2 full committees to handle. Ed Markey's subcommittee covers that in the House with great distinction and significance. Energy and environment is, of course, only one of the many issues that the Congressman has championed over the years, ranging from telecommunications changes and policies that helped really create the satellite television industry and enabled wireless channels and the like to deal with broadband and broadband access. He's been a champion from everything from homeland security to medical records access to federal fire safety standards. And he's also a real leader in the non-proliferation movement. He serves not only on the committees I've mentioned, but he's a co-chair of 4 bipartisan caucuses focusing on non-proliferation, privacy, Alzheimer's, and cystic fibrosis. But of course, all of us admire him most for having extended daylight savings time, done as an energy savings, but those of us who enjoy the occasional sunny day here in Boston are especially grateful for as well. But we're here to talk about energy and environment, and this year, with the Waxman-Markey American Clean Energy and Security Act, which has passed the House, it's a chance, perhaps, for a really historic first comprehensive energy bill for the nation's history. His work has included, of course, things like 35 miles per hour, 35 miles per gallon fuel economy standards and the like. But the bill does everything from, for the first time, really clamp down and put caps on the amount of carbon dioxide and other things that can be that can go into the atmosphere, as well as providing nearly $200 billion over 15 years to invest in the leadership and technology and so forth that we need. So it's an especially great honor to have him here. Let me also thank co-sponsors, the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs and its director, Graham Allison, and of course the Institute of Politics, Bill Purcell, for their help. But it is my very great honor to acknowledge, to welcome and thank Congressman Ed Markey.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David, so much. It's a great honor to be here, and just one omission, which is that my wife has a degree from the Kennedy School, and in addition, she was a fellow at the Institute of Politics just 3 years ago as well. And she was also Assistant Surgeon General of the United States. And so marriage to me is proof that there is such a thing as downward social mobility in America. And so it's a great honor for me to be here with you and with Graham. Thank you so much for hosting us. We're here with Joe Kennedy. You know, Joe founded Citizens Energy. He was then a great congressman from this district and for America, and then in turn, as he left, went back to Citizens Energy, focused on energy issues as his career path, and he's just been such a phenomenal leader for our country, as has, you know, as has the president whose name bears this building. So thank you, Joe, for being here. Ian Bowles, Secretary of Energy and Environment for the state, and so many other very distinguished people who are here today. I was elected to Congress 33 years ago, and I have served on the Energy Committee and on the Natural Resources Committee for 33 years apiece. That's 66 years of hearings on energy issues. No one has ever tried that before in our country's history. And then 3 years ago, Speaker Pelosi, as she was sworn in, announced that she was going to create one new committee, the Select Committee on Energy Independence and Global Warming, and asked me to be the chair of that as well, which I have been. Our goal was to create a new environment, notwithstanding the fact that President Bush was still in office, that would allow us to move forward on energy and environment issues, notwithstanding the lack of progress which we had seen for a political generation. I was put in a very awkward position because the head of the Environmental Protection Agency had not testified before the Energy and Environment Committee for 6 consecutive years. That is, that the Republican Congress had not actually brought in the head of the EPA to testify on any energy or environment issue. It was, without question, as we took over the House in January of 2007, it was the most successful witness protection program in the history of our country. People knew Bill Ruckelshaus's name, they knew, you know, Bill Riley's name. No one knew the name of the head of the EPA, the environmental minister of our country. And so that is not a good reputation to have around the world, huh? And a reason why they doubted the sincerity of our country. And so, having been the chairman of the Telecommunications Committee back in the 80s and the 90s, there I put together 3 bills which became law, which transformed the telecommunications industry. The first was the 1992 Cable Act, which which created the 18-inch satellite dish revolution, which then put pressure on the cable industry to innovate. Then in 1993, I moved over 200 megahertz of spectrum for the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth cell phone license, but we banned the first two companies for bidding for that spectrum because the new companies were all going to go digital. And so the price of a phone call with your cell phone dropped from 50 cents a minute to under 10 cents a minute in just 3 or 4 years. And the first two companies had to move in that direction as well. And the third bill was the 1996 Telecommunications Act. Not one home in America had broadband in February of 1996. Not one home had broadband. So that revolution, with the technology that had already been developed, was stultified. And so my goal in that 1996 Telecom Act was to induce paranoia in a Darwinian way in all companies in that sector. When you come back 10 years later and you look at what happened after that bill passed, the names of Google, eBay, Amazon, Hulu, YouTube, thousands of companies. Those three bills unleashed $850 billion worth of private sector investment in our country. And we branded those technologies around the planet. Our goal here is another trio of bills, which was the plan which the Speaker and I had back in January of 2007. The first bill was the 2007 Energy Act, which included my 35 miles per gallon standard, lifting it from 25 miles per gallon. It had not been increased since 1975. Moving towards cellulosic biofuels, increasing the efficiency of appliances and buildings and other devices which we use in our society. The second was the stimulus package of this year, where we moved over tens of billions of dollars into solar and wind and other renewables, gave discretion to the Secretary to make decisions about moving billions of dollars into the smart grid, into battery technologies that can revolutionize the way in which we move and live and work in our society. And then this third bill, this Waxman-Markey bill, which is the bill that deals with climate change and energy technologies writ large. This bill is the bill that the world is waiting for to make a determination as to whether or not the negotiations that we will be undertaking in Copenhagen will be serious or not. The Chinese are looking at us, the Europeans, the rest of the world. So as that bill passed on June 26th through the House of Representatives, it sent a signal that business as usual had ended and that we were now in a new era. The bill is now pending in the Senate, and my great hope is that we will see passage of that before the end of this year. That bill reduces by 17% greenhouse gases by 2020, 42% by 2030. 83% by 2050. It moves billions of dollars into new automotive technologies, into carbon capture and sequestration research, because coal is still 50% of our electrical generating capacity in the country, and we have to find a way of reducing the CO2 emissions. 50% improvement in building efficiency in our country. New standards for lighting and for appliances across the board to really create this technological revolution that will be the match for what we saw in telecom. Here, because energy is 4 times larger a sector than telecom, we believe it will unleash $1 trillion to $2 trillion minimum of private sector investment. We're already beginning to see the early stages of that in our country. So this is a great moment. But we needed leadership from the White House. We needed President Obama to be sworn in on January 20th. What a difference a day makes. And we then needed him to find the best possible Secretary of Energy that we could find. You don't have to be a Nobel Prize winner to be the Secretary of Energy, but it doesn't hurt. It does help to have the Secretary of Energy as your first witness back 5 months ago, and having the members of Congress who doubt the scientific basis for global warming, to have a Nobel Prize winner dispel your concerns in definitive scientific terms. And in each one of those issues, he has been, the indispensable building block for changing the terms of debate which we have in now the Congress and our country on all of these issues. He is a distinguished scientist, a member of the National Academy of Sciences, was the co-winner of the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1997. He was director of DOE's Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. He is a man of great scientific and political skill. It's recombinant political scientific DNA that you need in Washington in 2009 in order to move forward legislation of this complexity. He is one of the great citizens of our country and of the world. Please give a warm, once again, Harvard welcome to Dr. Stephen Chu.
Thank you. Thank you. So I will know if I failed if you don't clap as much at the end as the beginning. But thank you for that very nice, warm, generous introduction. So, good. I want to talk about laying the new foundation for a clean energy economy. And so what I ask you to do first is to imagine a world 10, 20, 30 years from today. And I claim that the price of oil will go up in the coming decades, just on supply and demand. I don't know what's going to do tomorrow, next year, even 4 years from now. But 20 or 30 years from now, because developing countries are going to be developing and they will require oil, because conventional oil production will begin to peak somewhere between now and 40 years from now. So it's conventional oil peaking, which means you begin to transition to more expensive forms of oil, deep offshore oil, tar sands oil, other forms. So that's one thing I'm pretty certain of. I'm pretty certain we're going to be living in a carbon-constrained world. It's going to become more and more obvious that the climate is changing, that humans have caused it, and around the globe, countries are realizing this, realizing that business as usual will not do. So, given these two conditions, you can ask yourself, what should the United States do? And so I'm reminded of what Wayne Gretzky said. When asked why he was such a good hockey player, he said, well, I position myself on the ice. And how do you position yourself on the ice? I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it's been. And so this is what we have to do, recognizing the price of oil will increase, recognizing we will be living in a carbon-constrained economy. So how are we doing? Are we skating to where the puck is going to be? Well, so far, not quite. This is our production of oil in red. This is the oil use in blue. The little downturn, as we all know, is the recession. But the point here is, even despite the great Alaskan oil, the production of oil in the United States has been declining steadily since 1970. Right now, we import more than 60% of our oil. We're falling behind in energy technologies. China is now spending over $12 million a day, or an hour, I can read it up there, over $12 million an hour on new energy technologies, because they see that the green energy technologies is something of a certainty of the future, and they want to be one of the leaders in that technology. We rank behind Spain, Denmark, Portugal in wind power, and we are a great importer of lithium-ion batteries, invented in the United States, but made commercially viable by Sony. We're falling behind on energy. This is a graph. This is the green, red, orange are the contributions to the U.S., Japan, Europe, and blue is the rest of the world in the development and manufacture of solar modules. We're falling behind, but I also list other technologies that relate to energy that we are not the leaders in, and that list is very, very long. We have fundamentally, over the decades, surrendered each advanced technology to others in Europe and in Asia. Around Washington, there are still some people who believe that the climate isn't changing. In fact, I've heard a number of policymakers tell me, well, no, it's not. For example, in the last 5 years, the Earth has been cooling down. Okay, so here's the record of the temperature from 1850 to 2000. You notice how dramatically the Earth has been cooling down over the last 5 years. So, you know, there's an expression we have in the Department of Energy: everyone's entitled to their own opinion. They're not entitled to their own facts. Now you can focus on that, and then there's no trend in the last 5 years where it's going down. It appears to be leveling off, but there are other bumps and wiggles, and there have been periods when the Earth did cool down momentarily. And the point here is not to focus on a 5-year, 15-year. This, you know, look at a 50-year time period, and over 50 years, it's unmistakable. And it's going to go up and down by bumps and wiggles. So I anticipate in the coming decades you might expect a bump or a wiggle. What else has been happening? These are measurements. There are geological measurements that say in the past 2,000 years the sea levels relative to land, you know, there's continental drift and the land does go up and down, but if you average out over all of the Earth over the past 2,000 years, there's been no change, but since the time of direct measurements, 1870, there's been a slight increase, but that has increased about fivefold. And now the alarming part of that fivefold increase from the time of first direct measurement, it is beginning to go outside the range of what climate forecasters had predicted 10, 15 years ago. That is to say, the sea level is rising faster than within the 90% probability that this is what we should expect. So it's accelerating. It's accelerating due to the fact that the oceans are warming up, therefore thermal expansion, and due to the fact that for the first time significantly there's convincing evidence that the loss of ice pack in the glaciers around the world is contributing to the increase. This is a record over the last 800,000 years of the carbon dioxide. Those bumps and wiggles are coincident, by the way, with changes in not only carbon dioxide, but the temperature. And so we are in a period today in the last roughly 10,000 years of a relatively warm period in the Earth's history. You go back 50,000 years and we are in Ice Age, where the average temperature of the Earth was about 6 degrees centigrade colder. So only 6 degrees centigrade is a profound difference in the Earth. The United States down to Ohio, Pennsylvania, covered year-round in ice with only a 6-degree colder worldwide difference. Okay? So now, this is where we are today in carbon dioxide. In a low-emission scenario, 550 parts per million, that's where we'll be. And in a business-as-usual scenario, that's where we'll be. So focus on the fact that we are already off the charts, not only in the last 800,000 years, but over the last 1 to 2 million years, and we go further off the charts. 50 million years ago, the Earth was warmer, but it was a very, very different world. Just as only 50,000 years ago, it was a little bit colder. A little bit colder, but it really felt like a lot colder. Polar bears were much happier. In the last decades, the United States has received more rain. The Northeast has received the most amount of more rain, but it's rain coming in downpours. And so what has happened in the United States in the recent past is there have been catastrophic floods, for example, in the Midwest. And so what is in store for us? Well, this is a plot of what's the probability of light drizzly rain on the far left-hand side and heavy downpours that cause these catastrophic floods on the right-hand side. And what this is forecasting is, if you're above or below the line, you're going to see either an increase or a decrease of rain. So what this is telling you is that we're going to see a slight decrease in the very light rains that London is so famous for, these dribbly things, and we're going to see a dramatic increase in the heaviest downpours. And so climate change will bring us more precipitation, but it will come in downpours. In the United States, it will come predominantly in the winter and early spring, and in the summertime, it will decrease. So this is going to be threatening our agriculture. And in fact, this is projections of probabilities where you see dark red or orange is where there's a chance that once fertile land could become desert. You notice the United States is not spared from this. Okay? So if we continue in business as usual, this is the risk we're running. In Boston, this is a prediction of both lower and higher emission scenarios of what the weather would be like, and it's significant. If you think about, you usually had one hot day per year that was above 100 degrees, expect nearly a month of it, 24 days in a business as usual scenario. Even if you don't do business as usual scenario, if you aggressively, you're going to still see it. Okay? So it's discomfort, but again, let me remind you that in the agricultural sectors of the United States, it's more than discomfort. It's wiping out of your livelihood. There are other things, tipping points, that I haven't mentioned. A tipping point is something very nonlinear. There are two examples. This is one example. There's a lot of frozen organic material in the tundra in Russia, in Canada, Alaska. And the reason is that this organic material doesn't get recycled by microbes and turned into carbon dioxide and methane is because the microbes are asleep. All of you in this room are well familiar with this. If you take some food, put it in your freezer, it keeps for months, maybe years, still edible. You take it out of the freezer, put it in the refrigerator, after 4 or 5 days, you can't eat anymore. It's spoiling because the microbes have woken up, and all of a sudden they're turning that hamburger meat or whatever you had in there into rotten stuff with the emission of carbon dioxide and methane. There's many gigatons of carbon in the tundra. We don't actually know how much, and the estimates vary, but it could be as much as twice the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere today. If the tundra starts to thaw, those microwaves will wake up, and it's only a couple degree difference between freezing and not freezing, and they will begin to process that organic debris, spoil it, and throw the carbon and methane into the atmosphere. That increases the warming and more thawing, and then you get a runaway effect. If this starts in any major way, then it's beyond our control, because then all of a sudden you're looking at carbon releases that are more than what humans are putting out today. So we need a new industrial revolution. So the opportunity is we can become industrial competitive, we can decrease our dependency of foreign oil, and we can help against climate change. And we have an opportunity to be an innovation leader. And so to seize this opportunity, Chairman Markey with Chairman Waxman have introduced this climate change bill, energy and climate change bill, and it is a comprehensive bill that paves the way for increased energy efficiency, the right signals to industry to say, look, we're serious, there's going to be a cap on carbon, it's going to ratchet down steadily over time, make adjustments, begin to make adjustments today, you have time to make those adjustments, but let's get moving. And with this bill that's now before the Senate, instead of a business as usual scenario, that red line in our carbon emissions, it's making these projections, as Chairman Markey has pointed out, that puts us on a much better glide path. A path designed to get us to 450 parts per million. Okay? How much will this cost? Well, until 2020, there's been various estimates of how much it will cost. So I'm listing three. One is the Congressional Budget Office, one is the EPA, and one is a semi-autonomous organization within the Department of Energy, the EIA. And you can read for yourself what the costs are. They vary from 44 cents a day to 20 cents a day. Okay? So that's the direct cost of this until 2020, and then by 2020, what is happening is some of the allowances begin to kick off, and hopefully we develop some of the technologies. We have now embedded the energy efficiency, and so one hopes that the costs will remain low. This is an assessment. This clean energy economy will create jobs. This is an assessment of the type of jobs it will create in the wind technology. And so, again, these are not only jobs, but these are going to be jobs that prepare America for a future, that future where the puck is going to be. So how do we get there? First and foremost, the most important thing is we should use the energy we have much more wisely. There's been a recent McKinsey report that has said if you make investments in energy efficiency, and the only ones that we're going to consider, says the McKinsey report, are the ones that have a minimum have to pay for themselves. So we're not going to do energy efficiency because it's a good thing to do, but it's going to cost more. The only things we'll even entertain are ones which will at least as a minimum pay for themselves over the lifetime of the investment. And now there are two things here. One is the energy end-use efficiency, and the one is the overall decrease in energy consumption. The overall decrease is, end use is what's the electricity you use in your house. But in fact, there's energy loss in the generation of the energy, in the transmission of the energy, in the mining of the coal, and all those other things. So there's a net loss of energy, and there's a bigger number. Okay, even if you just take the net loss, it says you can decrease the energy use in America by 2020 by 23%. The Waxman-Markey bill calls for 17% decrease. So you actually exceed Waxman-Markey if you just make those investments that will help you make money. Okay? So this is something that has not yet sunk into the American public because when you think of energy efficiency, the vast majority of people think, oh, that costs more money, can I afford it? How can you afford not to do this? Okay. One example in history, this is a graph of the energy use of refrigerators in blue since the mid-1970s. The brown curve is the size of each refrigerator going from 18 cubic feet to 22 cubic feet. The American appetite's still unsated. It's leveling off, you say, and so we're making progress. No, that's the size of the kitchen door that's making it level off. So you notice the refrigerators are wider and the newer homes have wider slots for the refrigerators, so we will continue to grow. The point here is that the refrigerators are using 4 times less energy today than they did in the mid-1970s. What about the cost of the refrigerators? Inflation-adjusted cost, factor 2 less. Okay? So this does not mean, so what happened? Well, better insulation, smaller compressor. The compressor was the major cost of the refrigerator. Okay? If you build a building with better insulation, better passive shading, better windows, smaller air conditioning system, cheaper energy bills. Okay? There's lots of things we can do. Here's a trivial thing. You go to light-colored roofs. If you go to light-colored roofs, you can reduce the air conditioning bills by 20% or more, depending on where you are. For those of you who think white is ugly, I have this picture of Centauri, Greece. I think it's kind of good-looking. We're having this debate in my household right now. Apparently, I found a couple months ago, you can actually go to the hardware store and buy this white coating that you can put on existing roof tiles. So you don't even have to wait for your roof to wear out. Now, there's something else besides reducing your air conditioning bills. which means that you generate less carbon from the electricity generating the electricity for the air conditioning, but the sunlight is reflected directly back into space. It's not trapped by the greenhouse gases. You know, sunlight is allowed to come and hit the Earth. It warms us up. The Earth warms up, but then the infrared radiation is trapped there. And so Art Rosenfeld and his colleagues at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab did a calculation. If we transition to white roofs and light-colored pavement, the pavement of the like cement pavement instead of blacktop pavement, you can reflect enough solar radiation back into space as if you've taken all the cars of the world, 1 billion vehicles, and kept them off the road for 11 years. That amount of carbon dioxide. So let's see, it saves money. It's it doesn't really cost much more, but I don't want to do it, okay? Okay, so we can do much better than that. There are technological developments that the Department of Energy is very keen on sponsoring and promoting. And this is that the way you design a building today is that many of the architects and structural engineers simply don't know how to design an energy efficient building. And when you make modifications, they don't actually know what the modifications will do. The modification is necessary because the building is over budget. And you have to do some value engineering. And so right now, one can go into a system where you have a computer that helps the architects and structural engineers design a better building and does in real time, if you make any change, this is the maintenance cost to the building. And this has already been done in the way we design airplanes. Every design change, every design in an airplane, it tells you how the airplane is going to perform. And so, and not only how it's going to fly, but its use of fuel, everything. Okay? So this is something we can do with very complicated systems like an airplane, and we can certainly do it with buildings. Finally, when the building is built, it's going to be a highly automated system, and we would like a set of sensors and computers to run the building, not the people in the facilities plants around the country. Why do we want to do that? Well, for the same reason that a set of microprocessors run your car. They constantly take in variables like the temperature of the air, the temperature of the engine, the throttle position, and they make adjustments to the air-fuel mix. They make adjustments to the timing of when they set off that spark. And because of that, you get a 30% improvement in the amount of power from an engine per unit of fuel. Now, that computer is pretty smart, but the garage mechanic doesn't know what the computer is doing with the car, and neither does the driver. Doesn't matter. It works. And when you take it in for servicing, the garage mechanic's computer talks to your car computer, and they just stand by and smile and collect their money. But the point here is that we do have these technologies that can work, and they can be made very robust. Okay. We should deploy the low-carbon technologies we have today. Wind is such a technology. It's been remarkable. The cost has come down by more than a factor of 10. There you see a huge wind turbine being erected over Europe's coast. How big is that? Well, it's a 5-megawatt generator. The diameter of the rotors is 126 meters. Just to give you a feel for how big that is, this is the biggest commercial plane flying in the skies today. It's a 747-400. Its wingspan is equal to less than one of the blades. Okay? Now, these things are also very remarkably efficient. You can do, as a physicist, you can make a calculation. Here's a certain amount of air moving at a certain velocity. There's a certain amount of kinetic energy. And you say, you've got to conserve momentum. When the air passes through the turbine, it's got to come out the other side, and it can't disappear. So there's continuity requirements, but that's all. And physicists love to do these type of calculations. No matter how smart you are, you're limited by conservation, momentum, and continuity of the air. What's the best you can do? It turns out to be a very simple algebraic expression, and you can extract 59% of the kinetic energy of the air. These guys extract 50%. Okay, so I leave it as an exercise to you smart Harvard people, how those three skinny little blades can do this. I think part of the formula for clean energy is that we will need nuclear, and I think that has to be part of the thing because it's going to take time. I'm a big fan of renewables, solar, wind, but it's going to take time to ramp it up, and we need energy storage and we need energy transmission. So this has to be part of it. I think the nuclear waste issue is a solvable issue, and the non-proliferation issue is a very serious issue, but again, I think that's solvable. All right, let me talk very briefly about this, what I see in the horizon. Let me give you an example of what I call a transformative technology. This is something that really rewrites the books, and this is what the Department of Energy wants to stimulate. I worked for the phone system, AT&T Bell Labs, for 9 years, and in 1915 or 1914, AT&T completed the first transcontinental phone line, and an essential component of that was the vacuum tube. It was the major developer of vacuum tubes in the 20s and 30s and even the teens. For those young people in the audience, this is what a vacuum tube looks like. It's sort of like what a postage stamp looks like. In any case, you know, when I say this is only going to cost 1 postage stamp per day, and some young person is looking and blinking at me. What's a stamp? Is that some subset of twittering? Anyway, so vacuum tubes work by heating up a wire, and electrons come out of a red-hot wire, and that's how the thing fundamentally works. You modulate the flow of those electrons that are emitted by that wire. But because they're heated red hot, they eventually burn out. And so in the 30s, AT&T said, you know, there's a recent new development in physics called quantum mechanics that revolutionized what had happened. This happened in 1925. By 1930, it had been applied to solids. And so by the mid-1930s, the physicists at Bell Labs said, maybe we can use this new theory to develop a solid-state vacuum tube. And so that's what they did. They invented a solid-state vacuum tube. That's what they invented. That's the picture of the first transistor. And transistors don't burn out. I know this. You know this. You know, when I have these stereo amplifiers and receivers, the first thing that burns out is the indicator dial light thing, and you can't see what you're doing anymore, but it's now integrated, so you can't replace the bulb. So you just kind of hunt around. I bet I'm too cheap to throw it away, so I hunt around until I push the button the right number of times to get what it should be doing. The on-off switch breaks, but the transistors work. Okay? And, oh, by the way, it invented and created new wealth in the country. Okay? That went well beyond the electronic amplification needed for telephone amplification. So this is a transformative technology. I think we need other transformative technologies. We need a technology that can build solar cells, solar modules that are a heck of a lot cheaper. This is a learning curve for silicon. That is to say, as more and more of the silicon modules get deployed, the price comes down. There's Moore's law for this. It's come down by a factor of 10, but it needs to still come down by about a factor of 5 before everybody around the world will think, you know, it's a no-brainer without subsidy, I will stick it on my roof. And every building will stick it on their roof. So it needs a new technology, a thin film technology, but that's something we need. Transportation. Now we have a much more of a challenge in transportation because liquid fuel is really great. Here you plot on the X and Y axes the energy density in terms of energy stored per volume, energy stored per unit weight. Those are the figures of merit for transportation energy. And what you see on the top corner is diesel fuel, gasoline, kerosene, jet fuel, and body fat lead the way. Why body fat? Well, look, this is nature's way of protecting you. You're mobile, unless you're really fat. And you want to store the density in the highest form, the energy in the highest density form possible. So your body chooses not to store it in carbohydrates. It chooses to turn it to fat. Now, way down there next to zero is where the current lithium-ion batteries are. Okay? But it doesn't have to get up to gasoline diesel fuel because an electric motor weighs a lot less than an internal combustion engine, okay, among other things. So it needs to get to about here in a cost-effective way. It needs to last, the battery needs to last about 15 years, and it needs to get under $10,000, you know, $5,000, so it's a small fraction of the cost of a car. And then it will really change automobiles. With that, you can get probably 200 or 300 mile range. Okay? To drive home the fact how good jet fuel is and kerosene, here's a little question. What does a Boeing 777 have to do, or what does it have in common with a bar-tailed godwit? So what's a bar-tailed godwit? It's a bird. That's a bar-tailed godwit. It's about this big. This bird, for reasons that are only known to the bird, migrate from Alaska to New Zealand every year. It's weird. But they both can fly nonstop 11,000 kilometers, 7,000 miles. Okay? Now, when a 777 takes off, 45% of its total takeoff weight is jet fuel. When a bar-tailed godwit takes off, 55% of its weight is body fat. And it lands one skinny bird. This is nonstop. Okay? So, you know, talk about aerobic exercise. Anyway, let's move on. Carbon capture and sequestration. I think it's not only possible to do this in an economically viable way, I think it's necessary. It may be possible for the United States to turn its back on, but first of all, we're 50% coal today. And the United States, China, India, and even Russia will not turn its back on coal because that's where 2/3 of the coal supplies lie. And so we have to figure out how to use it in a clean way, in an economically viable way. So because China and India will not turn its back on coal, so the United States has an opportunity to invent those technologies that can enable us to use this resource cleanly. In terms of new generation biofuels that Congressman Markey talked about, this is the field of grass. It's grass called miscanthus. It's growing in a university outside a test station in the University of Illinois. That graduate student standing there, in case you're wondering, is 5'3" tall. In the autumn time, you mow the grass, and it grows back the next year to that height, 11, 12 feet, without irrigation and without fertilizer. And so it's grasses like this that we think could be much more productive than corn with a lot less energy inputs. And if we learn how to break down material like this as well as bio-waste materials like wheat straw, rice straw, corn cobs, corn stover, lumber waste, then we can actually replace a significant part of gasoline consumption. The other thing is that we want to go beyond ethanol. And so we have already modified microorganisms like yeast and bacteria, put in many, many different genes. So when fed simple sugars, these yeast that used to create ethanol now create gasoline and diesel-like fuel, not at commercially interesting quantities, but it only took 6 months to modify the organism. So hopefully in the next 5 years, it can be industrialized. But we'll see. It's a research project. The institute that did this was an institution sponsored by Department of Energy. It was led by Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, but it had a number of other institutions. And what happened is many people from these institutions gathered under one roof, committed themselves, let's figure out how to do this, lost their institutional identity. Remarkably, the principal investigators stopped acting like professors, which said, this is my group, give me my money and let me do my thing, and said, we've got to solve a problem, and started working together in a way that's very exciting to see. And so this is something that we're trying to spawn elsewhere around the country in what I call innovation, energy innovation hubs, or I call them Little Bell Lablets because that's where I'm from. There are a number of other research innovation ideas that we're going to be trying, but the innovation hubs is something very near and dear to my heart because it's derived directly from my experience at Bell Labs and also from my conversations with people who worked at Lincoln Labs on radar during the war and in the Manhattan Project. Believe it or not, I'm old enough to have talked to the veterans who actually lived in those labs. And when they tell me about what they did and how the things were organized, or did, because many of them now have passed away, it's where those sections, those parts, Los Alamos and Lincoln Laboratories, were led by people who were scientists, but who were very actively engaged in the management of what was happening on a day-to-day basis. What experiment happened? Oh, that tells us we should go here, not there. Let's think about it, let's talk about it, let's move in that direction. And they moved much faster than they could have ever been done in a normal academic or national lab setting. And so this is what we want to start. So let me finish by reminding you first of this image taken in 1968. Apollo 8 was the first mission that went to the far side of the moon, and on the way back they took this picture. It's a picture of what's called Earthrise, and it shows a very bleak lunar landscape, a very beautiful, inviting Earth. Another takeaway message is there's nowhere else to go. And so the astronaut, Bill Anders, who took this photograph, said, we came all this way to explore the moon, and the most important we discovered was the Earth. Now, and what we've discovered since then is that we're changing the destiny of the Earth. And so we have an opportunity to minimize that change. So look, we're faced, in summary, we're faced with the following choices. We can become the leader of a new industrial revolution and lay the foundation of our economic prosperity, and we can save the planet for our children and our grandchildren. That's behind door number one. What about door number two? Hope that the price of oil will go back to $30 a barrel, deny climate change is happening or that humans caused it, and let our children pay the price. Let other countries take the lead in energy innovation and skate to where the puck's been. So that's door number two. So this is a trick question. Which door do you want? So let me end by saying I want to remind you of something Martin Luther King said in 1967 having to do with the Vietnam War, but it seems even more appropriate today in the energy climate change problem we face. So we are now faced with the fact, my friends, that tomorrow is today. We're confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Chu. Just spectacular. Now we come to the question and answer part of our session. Those of you that are new to the forum, we have microphones in 4 locations, and we just go around. Therefore, lining up at one microphone with a very long line is a good way not to get your question. So there are 4 microphones, and we'll just go in order. Now, a couple of ground rules. A good question has 3 characteristics. First of all, it starts by you're identifying yourself. Second, it is very short, containing one and only one thought. And third, it ends with a question mark. So with those rules, I'll start right here.
Hello, my name is Maggie Zhou, and I'm from Massachusetts Coalition for Healthy Communities. The Waxman-Markey bill, the final version, actually contains the emissions cap that is only 1% below 1990 level by the year 2020. If we use 1990, the conventional reference year that IPCC used. By contrast, IPCC's benchmark is 25 to 40% reduction by 2020 using that same reference year. So we're talking way below that expectation. And the question is, And that IPCC benchmark is actually aiming for 450 parts per million stabilization concentration. Now, my question for actually Secretary Chu is that within the IPCC report, they in fact acknowledge that there's only about 50-50 chance that we can avoid a 2-degree warming, which is catastrophic climate change, by even aiming for 450 parts per million. Do you acknowledge that fact? And if so, why did we not hear about it? And why do we hear that the 1% reduction is even enough?
Well, I think the Waxman Markey bill is shooting for a 450 part per million target. And what it really depends on is the total integral under the curve from now until how you begin to decrease. And so that slope that was shown was a target to get an 80% reduction in the United States by 83% by 2050. The original Kyoto target was 550. It's now 450. It's 450 because of you don't want to get near the tipping points. But the issue here is, quite frankly, that you want as strong a bill as possible, but you want a bill. Okay, and I can let Congressman Markey talk about this. And so the real issue is get it going. For gosh sakes, let's get something going.
If you do not talk about the odds.
Sorry, please. There's lots of people wanting to ask questions. Thank you very much.
I agree with you. Okay, you know, I can't deny that from the moment that the Republicans took over the Congress in January of 1995, do you know each year they actually added a rider which prohibited the Department of Transportation from increasing the fuel economy standards of the vehicles which we drive, a prohibition. My Appliance Efficiency Act of 1987, as it was implemented during the Bush years, they missed all 35 deadlines for every appliance at the Department of Energy. My Appliance Efficiency Law missed every deadline. The head of the EPA did not testify before Congress. We are behind. We are behind. We should be much further ahead. We're a technological giant. But let me say this as well. I'm an optimist. We moved from black rotary dial phone to BlackBerry very quickly. We moved from narrowband to broadband very quickly. I believe that people underestimate how quickly we're going to move to this new revolution once we put the market incentives in place, once we fund basic research. I think we're going to have a very rapid response. But that all said, Henry Waxman and I negotiated to the best of our ability, each one of us with lifetime 100% legal conservation voters' records, the absolute outside political limits of what we could do at this time, going from a dead start from the day that President Obama was sworn in. We're going to do more. There was a Clean Air Act of 1990 that was built upon the Clean Air Act of 1978 and the Clean Air Act of 1970. This won't be the last time we visit this between now and 2020, 2030, 2050. If we're right, if we're about to unleash a technological revolution, then we'll be able to return to this in 5 or 6 years, and then in 10 years, and then in 15 years, to accelerate this revolution so that we're the global leader. Okay, so the science is quite clear. I agree with you. And Henry Waxman and I, in conjunction with the Speaker, we set the strongest possible goals that we could for our country. It's highly ambitious. It is with great resistance from many industries in our country. But if we can get it on the books, like the 1990 Clean Air Act, that was the acid rain problem. It turned out that the cost of compliance with that law was 80 to 90% lower than all of the experts projected because of the technological revolution that it unleashed in order to solve the problem. I think the same thing is going to happen here, as happened in the Clean Air Act, as happened in the Telecom Act, and if we get to it as quickly as possible, the genius here of Harvard and MIT, of Caltech and Stanford will finally then have marketplace applications for what is already there in basic research, and we will solve the problem. So I'm an optimist, And I think if the quicker we get it on the books is the quicker we can then turn to the Chinese and Indians and say that we are no longer, as a country, preaching temperance from a bar stool. We are now going to be the leader, okay? And if we do that, then we will create a public-private planetary partnership to solve this problem. But the first step is to make the United States the leader at Copenhagen.
Thank you. Right up here.
Yes. I'm concerned about I'm concerned about global warming. With the present administration, hopefully the energy crisis will be resolved. Hopefully the global warming crisis will be resolved, and so forth, and around the world. If so, how long will that take, do you think?
Well, I mean, we're about to enter into negotiations in Copenhagen this December. Again, it's very complicated. I'm hopeful, but and the reason I'm hopeful is that first, the United States is moving in the right direction. Just came back from China a couple of weeks ago, and China is aggressively moving in the right direction. As compared to 2 years ago, and certainly compared to 5 years ago, it's like night and day in terms of their attitude towards climate change. That they recognize it's happening. The consequences would be devastating to their country, and every leader I talked to acknowledged this and said that China's trajectory in its emission of carbon is unsustainable for our country and for the world. So this is something 2 and 4 years ago I didn't hear any leaders saying. Now I'm hearing it from the premier on down. So I think one has to be very hopeful that this will be resolved. I don't want to see us to start living in a carbon-constrained world a decade from now. It should be, you know, a couple of years from now or a year from now. But
Right up here.
Thank you. My name is David Pomerantz. I'm a field organizer for Greenpeace in Boston. And I thank you both for being here and for taking my question. I want to know so I suppose it's directed towards Secretary Chu. I'm curious about the Obama administration's plans for Copenhagen. Referring back to that earlier question, the Waxman-Markey bill doesn't meet the benchmarks established by the UN IPCC in 2007. And I understand, and I sympathize for the very difficult politics of this and the Republican obstructionism and the difficulty of that. However, as both of you gentlemen both know extremely well, the atmosphere doesn't, the climate science doesn't care about climate politics. Yeah, so my question is, what will the Obama administration do in the run-up to Copenhagen and at the treaty conference in Copenhagen to make sure that the benchmarks established by Waxman-Markey are not the minimum negotiating standards that we're using, which is far lower than what the developed countries in Europe are saying and far lower than what the science demands?
well, what the science demands again is that the total integrated carbon emissions over a period of time has to be lower than such and such. Well, it doesn't have to be. We'd like it to be lower than such and such to minimize the probability of going, you know, into the 3 and higher degrees Celsius increase in temperature. Let me translate slightly what Congressman Markey was saying. He's saying, you know, the target for the mid-target of 2020 is not as aggressive as what was laid out by IPCC. One recognizes that. That means in order to catch up, you have to be much more aggressive a decade and 2 decades beyond. And but the reality is, if we go in and say, look, it's going to be either 30% reduction by 2020 or else that's all we're going to be satisfied with, what we're going to get is a bill that's 0 reduction. And so, you know, as time goes on, as we find out, as we develop the new technologies, and it's not going to be as costly as we recognize with acid rain, then we revisit and say, okay, we can. And in fact, we're doing this today EPA is beginning to look at the sulfur and dioxide and nitrogen oxide levels and the caps. And they're saying, you know, we can ratchet this down because it's not going to really cost that much. And so you can revisit and ratchet down again later. And so that's the issue. But if you ask yourself, would you rather have a bill this year or a bill maybe 5 years or 10 years from now, I'd rather have a bill this year.
Thank you.
And if I just want to add that we have tens of billions of dollars in this bill for deforestation in the Amazon, the Congo, and Indonesia. That's 20% of all greenhouse gases. If we don't pass this bill, the funding's not going to be there to preserve those rainforests. And in a lot of ways, the problem is unsolvable if we continue to see the devastation of our natural assets around the planet. And the same thing is true for the billions we have in there for adaptation to global warming, investment in new energy technologies. If we don't have a bill, then we might have to wait until the second Obama administration. And so we should be thinking in the second Obama administration about what else we're going to be adding on. And so we have to deal with the reality of where we are politically. Copenhagen's coming up. We have a bill that is now commanding the attention of the leaders of India and China. When Speaker Pelosi and I visited China over the Memorial Day weekend just 2 months ago, President Hu was able to talk to us about Waxman-Markey for an hour. Premier Wen was able to talk to us for an hour about Waxman-Markey and the provisions that are in it. It was clear that it was game-changing legislation that indicated to them that the Bush administration has ended and we're in the Obama era. They understand that they're going to have to change. We should try to take advantage of this opportunity politically, and then we can build on it as the years go by.
Right over here.
Cynthia Bowman, Cambridge. What about the use of more natural gas in this country and around the world?
Well, very briefly, I think in the short term, again, if you put a price on carbon and a limit on carbon, that would tilt the balance towards, in terms of current base load generation, while we ramp up the renewables, that it would favor natural gas over coal. And so I think that one expects that. But you know, in electricity generation, natural gas generates about a factor of 2 less carbon dioxide per unit of electricity. Okay, but let me go back, and I want to make sure this audience doesn't lose the fact that for the next coming decades, energy efficiency, using energy more wisely, is going to be where the huge savings are going to be, and the reductions in carbon dioxide are through energy, using energy in a more intelligent way.
Right over here.
Jonathan Levitt, is this on? Jonathan Levitt, I'm an entrepreneur. You mentioned nuclear energy very briefly and then said almost nothing about it. I don't want to seem to pry, but that's one area where there could be a big role for government. Can you be more specific about what would be needed to get us to a place like France where they have successful use of it?
Well, there's been, I think it's the Energy Act of 2005, gave the Department of Energy the ability to make loans, which include loans to help restart the nuclear industry and other energy loans. And so we've gotten the first of these loans out. We're expecting that the nuclear energy loans, which are $18.5 billion, I'm hopeful of making announcements you know, before the summer ends, quite frankly, or in the very early fall, as to who the awardees are going to be. The NRC is working on approving the licensing, has developed a more streamlined process for the time it takes to license. I'm entering discussions with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We have some assets and some expertise, and say, if you want to use our expertise to help in your decision-making as to the safety, you can do this. So there are many other ways we're trying to help get this thing started.
If I can, the Nuclear Energy Institute endorses the Waxman-Markey bill. And the principal reason that every major nuclear utility in the United States endorsed it is that in a low-carbon, no-carbon world, nuclear power becomes a much more competitive alternative for utilities in the generation of electricity as the years go by. So it makes them a more attractive investment in the private sector. It's not granola chompers from Harvard that ended the nuclear power industry in the United States 30 or 40 years ago. It was the Wall Street just stopped investing in them. So here, what you have is a new marketplace that makes it much more attractive, supplemented by federal dollars that will be there to help in the research for new, more modern nuclear energy technologies going forward, although it will be in a very competitive marketplace with natural gas, with wind, with solar, with biofuels, whose competitiveness is only going to increase as the years go by.
Right up here.
Hi, Brad Johnson with the Center for American Progress. I'm interested in the concept of whether like clean coal is a misnomer, but I'll leave that aside. And my question is, we're talking about the flaws or the limitations of Waxman-Markey, and I'm wondered, this is a very nice forum, but congressmen and other representatives have been going to town hall meetings, and there are thousands, if not millions, of people across this nation who are convinced that your legislation is some kind of national energy tax that's going to lead to the destruction of the American economy and bring about socialism and other terrible things. And so I'm wondering, what is the reason for that kind of political landscape that we're in right now?
We're inducing massive levels of paranoia in existing generating fuel sources across the country. Okay? So they have to rely upon scare tactics. But as Secretary Chu already pointed out, the cost is no more than 20 cents to 44 cents a day for Americans. And as he said, that's not factoring in how much less energy by 2020 you might be consuming because of all the new devices and gadgets that have been invented because of this new marketplace. So to a certain extent, my mother always said, Eddie, try to work smarter, not harder. She would always say that before she would say, I'm going to donate your brain to Harvard Medical School. It's a completely unused human organ, okay? But what she was talking about really was how do you work smarter? And so obviously what the Secretary is talking about and the kind of technologies that we're talking about are not only going to have a small impact in terms of the consumer, but actually might wind up with them being net beneficiaries as they're at the airport saying, oh, I forgot to turn off the air conditioning. Why don't I just go to my BlackBerry energy device, efficiency, control system for my house and just shut off the air conditioning? A lot of people want to keep it on so it'll be nice and cool when they get home in 2 weeks, huh? Or nice and warm when they get back, huh? Wouldn't it be great if at the airport they could turn it on as they're arriving, huh? How much energy could you save? And think of a million other things that you could do. So there's a great fear, obviously, that new industries will emerge. But at the end of the day, I think the evidence is clear that with the endorsement by the Edison Electric Institute, the Nuclear Energy Institute, the NRDC, General Electric, Dow Chemical, the Consumers Union, religious groups across the country, that we've put together an unprecedented coalition of business leaders, environmental leaders, consumer and religious leaders to create really a revolution that can change the way in which we generate electricity, but simultaneously create a pathway for our consumers and industries to make the transition to that new era 10 years from now. We have the funding in the bill that makes that possible, which is why we had such a broad range of endorsers of the legislation. So I think the more that we make this case, right now healthcare is really dominating the debate, but if Americans understood that we produce 8 million barrels of oil a day, but we import 13 million barrels of oil a day, and this bill combined with fuel economy standards can reduce by 5 million barrels of oil a day the amount of oil we import, and we can tell OPEC we don't need your oil any more than we need your sand, that's a good selling point. If we tell them that we can create 2 to 3 million new jobs in this sector over the next 10 years, that's a big selling point. If we tell them that we can stabilize countries around the world who otherwise will be destabilized with what climate change is going to do to their rivers, to their glaciers, to their deserts, okay? I think that's a big selling point. I think once the President makes this case in prime time, after this healthcare debate passes us by, I think it's going to pass. I think the American people are going to understand the bill. and support it in overwhelming numbers. The polling actually says that when the argument's made that way, it's 70% of Americans want us to finally put this relationship we have with these old technologies in a rearview mirror and move ahead. And that's going to be our opportunity this fall, hopefully with the help of everyone here. All issues go through 3 phases: political education, political activation, political implementation. Okay? And we're going to need everyone here to make it possible for us to telescope the time frame. Yes, you can find deficiencies in the bill, but the larger goals of the bill and what it will accomplish are so historic that it will be the most important energy and environment bill that ever has passed the United States Congress. And we're going to need everyone here to make it possible for us to be able to accomplish that
goal. Very, very briefly, when you hear someone say that, what I hope you will next time have the opportunity to say, oh, really, that's interesting. Tell me about how you got to those numbers. Tell me, you know, what did you assume in order to say that your, let's say, the energy prices will double? Because just saying, oh, okay, fine, because then it becomes a he said, she said sort of discussion, which is not what this is about. So it's, you know, when I meet people in Congress to say, no, the Earth isn't warming enough, I say, well, here's the data that I know about. Where's your data? And they say, well, it's sunspots and it's solar cycles. And I said, yes, solar cycles and sunspots do vary. There's 11-year cycles. Well, no, we measured. Here's what it's been doing over the last 150 years. It's been wobbling up and down over the last 150 years, but the temperature's been going like that. So get it on a discussion where you say, how did you get this opinion? We'll talk about it.
All right. Well, I've been given the signal, unfortunately, that the Secretary's schedule demands that we call things to a close. I'm very sorry to all of those who would like to ask questions, but let's give a very strong round of applause to both our speakers today. Thank you. Have a nice afternoon. Thank you, everybody.